Welcome to Canadian Affairs. I am Sam Forster, and today I will be speaking with Dr. Matt McManus. Dr. McManus is a Canadian political scientist who lectures at the University of Michigan. He is the author of, among other books, The Political Theory of Liberal Socialism, published by Routledge in 2024. He is also a frequent contributor to various popular outlets, including Jacobin and Unheard. Dr. McManus, thank you for being with me.
Yeah, it's great to see you again. Been a while.
So, I am going to dive right into our discussion today. The recent Canadian election saw Mark Carney's Liberals secure a minority government, partly by consolidating the progressive vote in response to external pressures like US tariffs. How do you assess the current strength of Canada's progressive movement, and what does this electoral outcome suggest about its ability to mobilize under a big tent Liberal Party?
Well, I think that there are a couple of things to say here. The first one is that no one could have predicted that something like this was going to happen. And like many commentators have stressed, I think that there are two big catalysts for it. The first one is the Liberals quite cleverly decided to replace Justin Trudeau, whose polls were really in the dumps, with Mark Carney, who just drips this veneer of competence, stability, intelligence, you name it, right? All the kind of things that people look for in the midst of a crisis. And this isn't unprecedented. The Liberal Party of Canada has dropped unpopular leaders before. Look what happened to Pierre Trudeau, right? Once it looked like he was going the ways of the dinosaurs. And provincial parties do the same thing as well. I'm old enough to remember when Kathleen Wynne stormed the breaches of the Liberal Party of Ontario, won a majority, and then just disappeared after she was beaten by Doug Ford. But the second big catalyst for this happening was, of course, Donald Trump. Now, most Canadians don't like Trump. Poll after poll has shown that. But I think that there's really no denying the fact that the reception of the second Trump presidency is even more negative than the reception of the first Trump presidency in Canada. And there are pretty obvious reasons for that. Trump made some aggressive gestures towards Canada in his first presidency, but nothing on the scale of threatening the country with overt annexation, let alone dropping very, very destructive tariffs on one week, withdrawing them the next, and then constantly threatening to go back and forth on this. And when that happens, a lot of voters tend to get into survival mode, and it's no surprise, given both of these factors, that a lot of progressive Canadians decided that the Liberal Party of Canada was the better vehicle on which to hitch their aspirations.
Right. And the election results showed a significant perception amongst the Canadian public that there was this competence that Mr. Carney had, and he was certainly campaigning more on these economic considerations rather than explicitly progressive policies. Yet it did turn out that he drew support from voters who might typically back the NDP or Greens. What role do you think a distinctly progressive faction could play within the Liberal Party's big tent structure, and how might it balance ideological purity with pragmatism?
Yeah, so I think here it's important to stress that Justin Trudeau, for all he campaigned as a progressive political figure, by and large stuck to the kind of center-left playbook that the Liberals will sometimes indulge in. So we got things like legalized marijuana, which is not inconsiderable, right? When you think about the costs that were associated with that. But we also didn't get something like a revision of the first past the post system, which I note that Justin Trudeau himself has said recently is his greatest regret about being in politics. He'd wish he had shifted from that. And that's something that progressives have been calling for decades now. And unsurprisingly, the Liberals, once in office, decided that given that they were the beneficiaries of Canada's current electoral system, they didn't want to see those changes. So I think that the gap between someone like Carney and Trudeau can be easily overstated. Important to remember that a lot of the more progressive policies we got at the back end of the Trudeau administration were really pushed by the New Democratic Party, which they need to rely upon for electoral support. If you think about things like the very generous benefits during the COVID pandemic, obviously the expansion of dental care, you get the idea, right? And that leads me to the second part of your question, which is I have less confidence that the Liberals in their current iteration will push progressive policies than that the 7 or 8 new Democratic members of Parliament will, whatever it ends up being. I'm not sure. Actually, I haven't checked yet. It's 7, right?
I believe as of now it's 7. Yes.
Yeah, it's 7, right? So the 7 new Democratic Party members could potentially wield some clout in the new Parliament, given that the government is going to need to rely on them in order to avoid facing another election. And I have to point out that they might be able to wield a little bit more clout than they otherwise would be expected to, given the fact that the party has been shattered, because poll after poll show that Canadians do not want another election at this point, which means that there's going to be a strong impetus placed on all the respective parties to make things work. And a lot of that is, of course, going to fall on the government, which is going to need to rely on support. But I don't think that there's any denying those silver linings aside, or qualifications aside, that the Liberal Party is probably not going to be in a particularly ambitious mood in terms of advancing reformist, let alone radical kinds of policies when the country is facing an existential threat. If anything, the atmosphere right now seems to be to batten down the hatches, tighten your belt up, and hope for the best. And that tends to usually induce a pretty conservative mood on the part of policymakers.
The Liberals and Conservatives collectively captured roughly 80% of the vote. Do you see this as evidence that Canada is moving toward an American-style two-party system? And what do you think that would mean for left-wing politics in Canada?
No, I don't think so, right? I mean, look, there's always a temptation after a pretty big election like this one to want to say something really exciting and really sexy, right? Like the new Democratic Party is dead, the Green Party is dead, the Bloc Québécois is essentially irrelevant. Well, I'm old enough to remember that people have said that, in the 1990s, and then they said that again in the 2000s, and now here we are in 2025, and people are saying it again. Parties are very, very capable of rejuvenating their fortunes under the right conditions, right? Think about the 2011 election. The Conservative Party of Canada won a considerable majority. The New Democratic Party was sitting pretty at over 100 seats, was the official opposition. And many people were concerned that the Liberal Party of Canada was going to be relegated to irrelevance for the foreseeable future. Something that I myself slightly hoped for. Well, they've now been in power for about 10 years, and it looks like they're going to be around for at least another 2, 3, maybe even 4 years, depending on the circumstances. So I think that the New Democratic Party has sufficiently deep institutional, cultural, and ideological roots in the country that it can find ways to rejuvenate itself in the future and serve as a vehicle for the aspirations of more progressive Canadians. But let's be very clear, right? This was a devastating election. It was a big loss for the New Democratic Party. That kind of silver lining that I'm presenting there is just that. It's not meant to kind of soften the blow, which was very considerable.
How do you think the left wing in Canada could capitalize on this moment to advance progressive policies in areas like economic inequality, climate policy, without being constantly overshadowed by considerations of economic nationalism or other crisis-driven narratives?
Well, I think there's 3 things to say. Maybe I'll just talk generally about what the silver linings are in this election for progressive Canadians, and then I'll bleed into talking a little bit about how we can push our agenda. So the first thing to note again is it is beneficial that the Liberals didn't win a majority, which means that they're going to need to depend upon the New Democrats, one Green Party member of Parliament in the foreseeable future. They might turn to the Bloc, but they'll probably be a little bit more hesitant to do so given the kind of connotations of that. And I can't really foresee them working with Conservatives unless it's on something that's of existential significance. That gives the New Democrats and Elizabeth May a little bit of traction to try to shift the Liberals leftwards on policy considerations that are important to progressive Canadians. The other thing that's important to stress is there's election was as much a referendum on whether Pierre Poilievre was ready to be prime minister as anything. And what's very clear is that while Poilievre is clearly very popular amongst conservative Canadians, and his ceiling is a lot higher than many of us expected, it's also the case that he negatively polarized a huge number of people into holding their nose to vote for the Liberals or doing whatever it is they could to block Pierre Poilievre. And I think that that's a positive sign for progressive Canadians, that by and large, a majority of voters in the country remain pretty center-left in their orientation and don't want a, if not hard right, at least polemically right conservative to be in power. And then I think that the third thing that progressive Canadians have going for us is that the reality is that Donald Trump is probably not going to go anywhere for the next 3 years. There's been some rumblings here in the United States that if the midterms pan out in the Democrats' favor in 2026, they might try to impeach him again. But it's extremely difficult to see, the Senate under any realistic composition launching a trial that'll get rid of Trump. And as long as he's around, the reality is that a certain kind of conservatism, at the very least, is probably going to come across as unpalatable to a lot of Canadians because it's going to convey strongly Trumpy vibes. And given that that's now taken to be threatening and disconcerting, that'll definitely be a weight for any conservative that tries to mobilize around those kinds of populist energies. And that's not just true in Canada either. You can look at what happened in Australia very recently with the election there, or you can point even to Germany, where a lot of people were negatively polarized out of supporting the AfD because a lot of Germans didn't like Elon Musk or Trump for that matter. But again, those are all silver lining ways of approaching an election that was bad for the Conservatives, but also very, very bad for Canadian progressives. In terms of what we can do to try to advance a more expansive and hopeful agenda in the future, I think that we need to actually get back to brass tacks and start thinking at a much more principled level about what kind of movement, and indeed, if we're New Democrats, what kind of party we want to see. I think that the major problem that you see with Jagmeet Singh's tenure in particular is Jagmeet Singh really tried to ride a wave of ambiguity about where he situated himself ideologically to, political power. It was very unclear whether Jagmeet spoke for the more radical wing of the New Democrats and wanted to see something like democratic socialism at broadband advanced, or whether he was going to be a more moderate New Democrat, pushing for a kind of Jack Layton style compassionate liberalism. And I think for some politicians, that ambivalence can serve them well because it allows them to be all things to all people. But clearly, for the New Democrats under Jagmeet Singh, it didn't serve us well since people really had no idea what it is that we stood for. So I think there needs to be a ideological rethink at the level of first principles about what kind of movement we want to be, what kind of convictions are centrally important, and how to broaden our coalition amongst ordinary Canadians while at the same time remaining true to those principles, whatever it is that we come down on them being.
Do you think that the Liberal Party will struggle in the coming years to grow their support with people who are more focused on issues of social justice and labor, given Mark Carney's personal background?
I suspect so, right? I mean, again, Mark Carney is something of an enigma. If you read a lot of his work, he presents as pro-capitalist, but at the same time, somebody who draws very heavily on a figure like Adam Smith to point out that there are limitations to what markets can do and there are exceptions to applying the logic of capital here and there. It's all in his book, by the way. And that kind of gives him a lot of ideological room to pivot, which, of course, is very in keeping with the attitude and the ideology of the Liberal Party of Canada, which has always prided itself on a certain level of pragmatism, realism, and, of course, chasing power at all costs. In terms of what its future prospects are electorally, look, you should never count out the Liberal Party of Canada. I think we've seen that proven election after election after election. Again, in 2011, after Michael Ignatieff went down in flames, many people thought that it was just destiny that the New Democrats were going to if not win office in 2015, at the very least become the official opposition for a long period of time. Well, obviously that's not what happened. Justin Trudeau became the leader of the Liberal Party, stole a lot of the progressive vote from the NDP, rode a wave of animosity against Stephen Harper to a majority, and they've been in office for a very long time now. Or look at more contemporary events. Pretty much everyone around the world, myself included, by the way, I don't claim to be a prophet this way, took the Liberal Party of Canada to be dead in the water in 2025, right? Just headed towards electoral collapse. And then Donald Trump came around. They strategically pivoted to a new leader. They ran a not flawless campaign, but quite effective campaign, I want to point out. And now they were awarded with not a majority government, but a stronger minority than before. And a lot of people seem quite willing to give Carney at least the benefit of the doubt. So at some point or another, Canada is obviously going to have a new government. I would hope it would be a new democratic government. Knock on wood, if we get a new leader and we're able to ride a wave of change. But never ever just assume that people are going to tire of the Liberals or that the Liberals won't find a way to grip onto power for another couple of years. They've proven time and time again to be a very effective political machine, which is one of the reasons why many political scientists characterize them as if not a hegemonic party, at least something that looks an awful lot like a hegemonic party.
Maintaining an ideologically diverse caucus is an act of achieving political middle grounds. Do you think that there are certain files, whether that be energy policy, foreign policy, social welfare programs, that could be the undoing for the Liberal Party in this upcoming parliament?
Well, I wouldn't normally say this, but I actually think that it's clear that foreign policy is very much on Canadians' minds right now. And the electorate is going to be extremely judgmental about how well Mark Carney and the Liberal Party handled Donald Trump and our interactions with the United States. Now, so far, I want to say strategically, I think they've done a pretty good job for themselves, right? Carney has clearly rode a wave of Canadian nationalism far more effectively than his political opponents. He seems to convey a sense of confidence without being idealistic, which I think is, again, appropriate for the moment. And I think that adjusting people's expectations so that they are realistic, given the parameters of what the next 4 years look like, is, again, probably tactically also a smart move. And I'd also like to note that he seems to have done a fairly good job, Mark Carney, of reaching out to premiers that were at least somewhat disgruntled with him over the course of the electoral campaign to help prop up this narrative of national unity in face of an impending threat. Just to give an example, Carney had the option of slowing down Pierre Poilievre's inevitable election in a riding in Alberta, right? And he chose not to do so. And I don't think that's any coincidence that allowing Pierre to run in Alberta is part of the reason why Danielle Smith, for example, has been more conciliatory in terms of some of her rhetoric over the last few days. Might also just be electorally savvy on her part, since she's quite a skilled politician. So I think that foreign affairs is without a doubt probably going to be at the top of everyone's mind over the next 4 years, not least because whatever else you can say about Donald Trump, the guy loves attention. In fact, he seems to have a pathological need for it. So I think it's extremely unlikely that he's going to stop trying to draw a lot of Canadians' attention to himself.
Right. One final question I have here. Do you have any sense of how this election outcome will impact progressive political movements at the provincial level?
I don't really. I mean, I was as surprised as anyone that the New Democrats were able to skate back in Ontario, for example, to the official opposition status because their vote was more efficiently distributed. I think that I'll stress my hopes rather than my strategic observations here. I think that one of the major reasons that the New Democrats, both at the federal level and in many provinces, have run into trouble is voters have a very hard time distinguishing them from the Liberals, right? Right now, in the average Canadian's mind, New Democrats are basically nicer, more conscientious liberals, but probably also partly for that reason, less effective, less realistic, and less grounded in the minutiae of exercising power, which is why many people are wary, even if they support what the party is doing ideologically, of electing them into office. Since the idea is, if you want new democratic policies, you vote for liberals, either at the provincial or the federal level, and you get a watered down version of it, but at least you'll get a version of it. I think that what the New Democrats really need to do, again, is go back to square one and think about what principles the party stands for, and then try to find a leader, or for that matter, a collection of leadership figures who embody that ethos in the minds of Canadians and, of course, in the minds of the party faithful. And I think that there's some good work that's being done just on this front right now. Just to give an example, my friend Luke Savage started a Substack recently. For those who don't know, Luke is one of the sharpest writers on the Canadian left right now, has been doing pioneering work, kind of reintroducing Ed Broadbent and the tradition of social democracy to a wider readership. And I think that would be a great place to start ideologically in terms of thinking where the party needs to go right now in a principled direction. So it has a philosophy that distinguishes it from the Liberals in the next election. Whether or not, the party is capable of this deep ideological rethink, and then combining that with the kind of institutional and leadership changes that need to take place, I really don't know. Again, I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I could give you something that was a little bit more predictive. But whatever, as I said, would be nonsense. So I just don't feel comfortable doing that.
Well, it's a tough time to make predictions, but I appreciate you joining me. I will leave it there. Dr. McManus, a pleasure as always.
Yeah, it was a pleasure talking to you, Sam.